Hi everyone, just before we get into this episode of Type 1 I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you so much for pressing play. I really hope you enjoy this episode. If you do, don't forget to hit subscribe and you'll be notified when new episodes come about. You can find us across podcast land on Spotify, iTunes, all those good places as well. Secondly, anything you hear on this podcast should not be taken as medical advice. I am, of course, not a professional, and you do need to seek advice from your healthcare team before making any changes to your diabetes management. And lastly, if you want to say hello, I do have an Instagram page specifically for the Type 1 podcast. You can find it at Studio Type 1. That's at Studio Type 1, the number, on 1, the number. And you can also come and say hello and follow me on my personal page, which is at Miss Jen Grieves. And all of that will be noted in the episode description. Hi everyone, and welcome to Type 1, a podcast that delves into the obscure, complex and challenging world of life with Type 1 diabetes. I'm Jen Grieves, and each week, with the help of some brilliant guests, I'll be showing that there is no normal when it comes to handling this whopper of a chronic condition, because we're all pretty much figuring out the messiness of day-to-day life with diabetes as we go. And most of all, even though it doesn't always feel like it, we are absolutely not alone. My guest today is senior paediatric diabetes dietitian Lila Digkliou. Originally from Greece, but now living and working in London, she's been helping children and families living with type 1 diabetes for more than 10 years. Lila started in general diabetes care, but over time felt that she could make the most difference to people's lives by helping them as soon as possible on their diabetes journey, making the move to paediatrics 8 years ago. And I know from being diagnosed as a child myself how formative those early interactions were, as me and my family were trying to understand our new reality. And I'm looking forward to discussing the challenges and complexities, as well as what I'm sure are the many rewards of this work. So welcome, Lila. Welcome to Type 1.
Hi, Jen, and hi, everyone. And thank you very much for the invite for today. I'm looking forward to discussing some of the questions that you've got, and hopefully we'll be able to answer some questions that other people may have.
No, thanks to you for joining me. I know you're super busy and, super in this work. And as I said, I think to have someone with expertise like yours at the heart of what is, a very complex condition, to say there are some complexities growing up with this condition would be an understatement. I'm sure you would agree with that, right?
I absolutely agree. It's very, very complex. And sometimes you feel that you can never get it right.
Yeah, absolutely. But I know from the little bit that we've chatted back and forth that, well, my aim and my hope, and I'm sure if I'm doing my job right, it absolutely will be helpful and practical as well for parents and carers of young type 1s listening. So I'd love to start by summing up a little bit for me the work that you do, if we really start from the basics there, and what's the role of a pediatric diabetes dietitian, but also how you generally day to day help families and children with type 1 diabetes.
So I work at a hospital, and at hospitals in the UK, we see patients with type 1 diabetes, every kind of diabetes really, both in MDT clinics, which means you have the dietitian, the nurse, and the doctor in the same room, usually in the same room, and then you see them as one-to-one appointments as well. Mostly you see them face-to-face, but you might see them by video calls or telephone appointments as well. And we have to see them at least once a year on one-to-one appointments, or at least we have to offer them, and then as many times as needed as well within the year. And we discuss anything that has to do with their diabetes and exercise management, carbohydrate counting. We review their weight, their height, and whether they need to put on weight, whether they eat enough for their age. Sometimes we see that many children may not eat much of a food group, and we're trying to balance things out. And then everything that the parents or the child have to ask us.
Right.
So it's a really nice role. I really enjoy it because in the pediatric diabetes, you see the same families over and over again, and you develop a relationship with them. you know their complexities, so it's easier to help them. Whereas in adult care, you might see them once or twice, and then it's a little different.
And is that something that you particularly enjoy in terms of being able to work in this world in many different guises, but that connection, that ongoing relationship development with the families? Tell me what that is for you in terms of personal job satisfaction.
I do enjoy it very much because it's very difficult for someone who sees you for the first time to open up for their complexities. And it's very difficult, especially for a child, to know that it's okay and you're not their teacher, that you're not going to tell them off if they're doing something that they think is wrong. So, by seeing them more time, you develop this relationship that they open up. They say, well, I haven't done this, I don't like this, or things that go well. And they know that you're not there to judge them, but you're there to help them and provide them with some information that you know, and you just want to share it with them and to just help them. So it's very rewarding.
I love that. I noticed that in your content. There's like you have an amazing presence in the information that you're offering on Instagram, and I will direct people to it later on.
Thank
But
you.
what I noticed from it was one, the clarity with which you're giving these kinds of tips and just taking bite by bite the challenges that you might encounter on a day to day, because there are just so many. Like living with this, I just feel like they're still endless. I'm always surprised. But B, the lack of judgment, and that really stood out to me. And it's something that I have had conversations with other parents or other people as adults entering clinics. That fear of judgment and where did your awareness of that come from? Is that something you've developed over time, or is that something that's actually taught through your training? I'm just kind of curious around that.
I developed it over time, and I think it came because some of their parents have given us feedback over time, and then you get to realize how difficult it is for a child or their parent to come to clinics. Some of the parents were coming and saying, "Oh, we had some weddings, we were on holiday, so the blood sugars were a bit high. Sorry about that." And we thought, you don't need to apologize. We're not your teacher. So one was many parents apologizing at some point, which made me realize how they feel about having high blood sugars or not being able to manage it so closely at some points. And then the other thing was a mom. We have very good relationship with her and the dad and the child as well. And the mom shared at some point in clinic that when he was he was newly diagnosed, he was crying in the car on the way to the hospital. And this made me feel very badly. Why did he cry? And I realized that sometimes in clinics, and especially in MDT clinics, the time that we have to review things is very tight. So we have to crack on, we have to review the readings. And what we are trying to do is improve things, make changes to the insulin, but that can feel a bit um, too tight for the parents that might need more time, or the child might feel that I'm being judged here. Whereas we're not judging anyone, we're just seeing if there is any problem, any issue, how can we can make improvements, change their insulin doses, and just help them. But maybe we don't do it in the right way sometimes, or maybe the perception is different. So this is definitely something that help us a lot, see it from their side, being on their shoes, and how they might feel coming to clinics every 3 months.
I can kind of hear the parents just breathing a sigh of relief and exhaling at the words that you're saying, and probably wanting to sign up with you immediately, adding to your workload there. I'm interested as to how you personally balance that need for tangible and actionable outcomes in these very short sessions and limited time versus that supportive and more holistic side of things, because you are a dietitian, but you can kind of speak to me a bit about how much this is food, glucose, carbs, but how much of this is more about other things in terms of the emotional side and the emotional aspects of type 1. So how do you kind of balance that given the time frames, and like, is there extra communication? Like, how does that look today in 2025?
So it's important for them to know how much time they've got available. So it's nice if they know, for example, we have 30 minutes or 45 minutes, and this is the agenda that I'm thinking to follow. This is what we need to do. Do you have any questions in the meantime? Do you have any issues? So their expectations are more manageable, and they know that I've got 30 minutes. We can um, run a bit out of time, but um, that's very important. Also, to know that they can ask us anything they need to ask. Um, and then I always think of, even if you give the best advice that you know that is going to have a result 100%, if the person feels that this is too much for them and they're not going to follow them, then it's a useless advice. So every time I'm trying to check whether that's something that they can do. And it depends whether the parent can do that or the child can do that themselves. So it's very important to check. And sometimes I see the child nodding, and then mom says, "Well, you don't like that, do you? You're saying yes now, but no, you're not going to follow this advice in the end." So I think that we have, in 2025, we have more awareness about how people feel about their diabetes, about the fact that it's not very easy to follow our advice sometimes because life gets in the way, because they have very little time, for example, at school to have lunch. So, but this is why we encourage them to bring all these problems to clinic, because they might have um, some some things at school in place that they can help them. For example, they may be able to go get out of the class a bit earlier. So there are ways to manage it, but we have to be open and honest about what the problem really is. And it definitely makes me feel um, that I'm doing a better job when the person with diabetes tells me what the complexities are and how my advice is going to impact them as well. We think that we are going to give you a better quality of life if you do carb counting or if you have better blood sugar levels, but quality of life for someone who has to carb count several times a day might be very different to what we think it is. So, from one point is having blood sugar levels in target and an optimal HbA1c and lower risk of complications, but it comes definitely with paying something for that, doing a lot of work.
Yeah, yeah. And I think being aware of that sometimes is a big piece of the puzzle, because I think for me, speaking personally, it was a long time before I sort of understood that this was a bigger deal than I was maybe admitting to myself. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
And I can imagine it's quite interesting, the dynamic between where the child is at in their head and what they perceive the condition to be, and then maybe what the parent is occupied with or worried about, or how they're perceiving the condition, and understandably their fears. So what are some of those main, if we take the parents first, or the carers, what are some of the kind of main challenges that parents or carers are worried about when they come to see you?
So I see people seeing diabetes in a different way. So we have some parents who are really worried about high blood sugars, even if the children have a spike for a little while. They're chasing the blood sugar levels. They might reduce the carbohydrates because they're so scared of this high reading. And then what we want to say is actually it's normal. So unless you leave it for a long time and you don't do anything about it and the doses are wrong, so it's normal to have some spikes, and there are some ways to work around it. On the other hand, we might see some parents who don't really understand the complications risk. So as clinicians, we have to talk about that as well, but in a way that it doesn't fill you with fear about the future. But you are aware of it because you have to be aware of it. It's our duty to let you know about the risks. But also, the good news is that there are ways to to manage it and to prevent these highs, for example, or to work in a way that will reduce the risk of complications. So
Yeah.
it's very important, I see, in parents when they are on top of diabetes from a young age and they support their children. It's very important because they continue to do it throughout when they're teens as well. And what I see a lot is teens coming to clinic and they give their parents this look that this is my diabetes now, you can't talk about it. But if a parent is more involved when the child is younger, it's easier for them to check on with a child when they are a bit older. So you have a bit more, um, you can do a bit more on yourself. But then if your parent asks you if you gave your insulin, you don't get so upset as you would get if the parent wasn't very much involved in your care when you were younger.
Yeah. I'd love to come back to that transition period in terms of letting go for the
Hmm.
parents, but also, yeah, just teen hormones and everything in general. So we'll come back to that. But children or young people, what are some of the main kind of concerns that they come to clinic with, or maybe that you feel that they are concerned with that they potentially aren't expressing? I imagine that happens a lot of the time as well.
It's diabetes itself. They don't want to have diabetes. So
Mm,
many of them tell me I want to feel normal. And that's why I don't have my insulin because my friends just eat. So I do the same thing. I just eat. So what I say to them is that you are normal. You are a normal person with diabetes. And if you don't give your insulin, it doesn't make your diabetes go away and can make it worse in so many ways because then you're chasing high blood sugars because then you have risk of complications. So how can we make it a bit easier? A very important thing is I ask them, do your friends know that you have diabetes? If they say yes, then we discuss how their friends can support them. When their friends can say, well, wait a minute, why are you eating? Have you had your insulin yet? So we involve the friends as well, if possible. Um, but they do come with the same thing that I don't have much time. I forget to give my insulin. I forget to do the carb counting. I want to do other things. I'm very busy. So it's very, very common in actually, even when they're children or a bit older, it's very common to say the same thing. I'm very busy. I've got other things to do. I want to feel normal.
okay. And we'll definitely come back to that in terms of offering some practical advice around particular challenges.
Mhm.
But what do you think, or what do you generally advise in terms of parents who are worried about these particular issues, or not being engaged, or not taking insulin because they want to be normal, in terms of approaching those conversations with a child, because obviously they're in much more regular contact than the care team. Do you have any kind of top level tips in terms of approaching those conversations with your children who aren't maybe as engaged as you as a parent or carer would like them to be?
First of all, it's very important to have the talk with the child, not so much with the parent, because it's the child who is going to have the insulin or not, and ask them what is the problem in their daily lives that they can't have their insulin. Not sometimes, for example, at school, get at the top of this problem and see how you can make adjustments. Um, what I see a lot is that they want to feel validated. Once you tell them, I know diabetes is annoying. I know that you have other things to do. I know that this makes you feel different. And I know that you would prefer to not have diabetes and that you would prefer to do other things. So I see a lot of relief. And that's actually very common that you don't expect me to do things that you don't understand me. They want to have understanding. And once you validate those feelings, they're more open to make adjustments, even if they begin with something small. So it's very important to tell them that I hear you. What you say is valid. And I don't think it's uncommon. I don't think it's something abnormal. It's valid. So that's very, very important. I think that's number one. And then you can negotiate things, and you can find what's better to put in place for them so that they do what we ask them to do. But understanding them and letting them know that we hear you, that's very important. I'd say number one.
Okay, great. And in terms of a parent in a situation with their child in the house, approaching a meal or after a day at school where that hasn't happened, would you say that approach would be similar to come at it from a place of understanding and be the child being seen and heard and validated?
Yes. And it's also important to let the parents know that this is actually common for in other families as well. And I see their relief as well when they hear that this is common. This is what this age brings. This is what the child with diabetes has to go through on daily life. And we hear that from other parents as well. And let's see now how we can improve things, how you can make your relationship a bit better in terms of you don't have to nag so many times and then the child doesn't get upset with you. So it's very important for parents to hear that it's actually something that a lot of parents are going through. It's very similar.
Okay, great. Again, we're breathing sighs of relief across the nation here. So I do want to kind of drill into that a little bit because understandably, I think for everyone involved, there is a lot of pressure because the targets are so clear, they're so defined. You get in this world of data that we now live in, I had a bit of a different story as a child because it was a bit more like ignorance is bliss, but maybe not
Yeah.
to a helpful extent, beyond a helpful extent.
Yeah.
So maybe it's the opposite problem now in terms of this very clear data that's in front of us. So can I kind of just clarify that time out of range is inevitable?
It is. It is. But also, you mentioned time in range, not HbA1c, and that's
Mm.
actually where we are heading towards now. So we used to see the HbA1c over a period of 2 to 3 months, and we're saying very good, HbA1c in target, so great, amazing. And then we were looking at the blood sugars in more detail, and we're seeing lots of hypos. But now we're looking at the time in range, and when you see a time in range that is very low, I always like to see it as a problem, and every problem has a solution. So, what can we do to improve that? You can take your insulin, for example, a bit earlier, or what is the issue that's causing this problem? But then, like I said before, many parents may get very worried if they see one high blood sugar level here or there. But that's going to happen. Even if you do everything perfectly, you count the carbohydrates to the gram, and then it's very hot. The blood sugars may go low, or you do exercise and the blood sugars may go low, or there is some stress and your blood sugars go high. So you are going to have some highs and lows that you don't expect, and that's normal. But it's different to just say, "Oh, it's okay. I'll just let it go." And it's different to review the readings every now and then think, "Okay, I reviewed the readings. I think that I can't pinpoint what was the issue, so that's just diabetes." And the like you said, inevitably we'll have some high blood sugars.
Yeah. What I'm hearing, though, as you've just expressed there, is that there are solutions
There
to.
are.
Do you feel like there's always solutions? Because we often do say, well, this thing is only, you can only control it to a point, or there are only so many variables that you can predict. Like, what would you say to someone who's like, I'm doing everything I can, child or adult, and this just isn't happening? Like, what's the response to that if someone's just, really at the frustrated end of all of this?
Well, if I want to be honest, you can't have it 100%. There are some parents and children that they have really amazing um, glucose management and very high time in range percentage, but it's very difficult. So you can't really have 100%. It's very tough, and we're not expecting that. This is why also they recommend a time in range above 70% and not above 90%, because you can't do it. There are solutions, and it doesn't mean that you make something wrong. It just means that we have bigger experience perhaps in that, or we might find some solutions from other parents or from research or from generally because we work on this field for a long time, and we might know some tips that will help you. It doesn't mean that you're not doing what you're supposed to do in the right way. There are some solutions, but we're not expecting 100% either.
So to come into an appointment, if you do have 30 minutes, say, together, what can families, parents, children, anyone involved in the care do to come into that appointment in order to get kind of the best out of it in terms of being able to understand what is happening and having the most productive use of time in terms of putting solutions in place? Are there things that the families can do to come into the appointment to get the most out of it, if you like?
Yeah, definitely. They can review the readings beforehand and have some ideas of what happened and not try to remember that at the time of a clinic, but have an idea, for example, if the child every Monday has low blood sugar levels, then they can give us some information. For example, he's playing football every Monday, and this is why he has low blood sugar levels. Or I've tried to make some changes, and then these changes didn't work. So it's having a look at the blood sugar levels. If you have any pump, to upload the pump depending on whether it needs to be uploaded or not. Have a look at the readings, have a look at the trends, and then say, discuss what you tried and didn't work, or your ideas about what could mean that you have very high blood sugars or very low blood sugars. So they can make the most use of the time when they are a little prepared.
And what about in terms of retaining the information? Do you have,
Ah,
I mean, it can be 101 in terms of literally bring a pen and paper, but I've often come away thinking like, wow, okay, that was a lot. And I want to retain as much as possible. But, how do you advise people approach that?
Usually, the nurses, when we do an MDT clinic, give them a handout and with some notes of what was discussed. And it's a really good piece of paper that you can take with you afterwards. We write down what we changed in the clinic, or if we suggest the website, we write the website so you can go back and look at it. So that's quite important, because otherwise you will forget half of what was discussed.
Yeah. And I mentioned at the beginning how formative those early interactions are or can be around time of diagnosis when this is all very new. It's new words, new jargon. It feels quite overwhelming and scary as well. And
Mm.
I would absolutely vouch for that. Um, what in your mind does good diabetes support and care look like in terms of these early interactions? And if parents maybe suspect or feel that they're not receiving the level of care that they need or want, is there anything that they can do about that?
A good level of care initially is to provide a structured training and also let them take notes or provide some different resources for different learning styles, because some people learn more by writing things, by doing more practical examples, some with looking at reading something or just hearing what you have to say. So it's different learning styles, and then if you use different approach and resources, that's really helpful for them. One thing that takes a lot of stress is if you let them know that it's a lot of information that we're going to discuss about, but we're going to have more sessions. And it's okay if you just forget about everything the minute that I leave, and then we can come back to it and make more examples. So if they know that it's something difficult and it's a lot of information and it's okay to forget about what we discussed, but we're going to come back to it, then it takes a lot of stress and you're more open to receive information. If they feel that they don't understand, it's very important that they're open and say, I don't understand it. And then the clinician needs to find a different way to have the discussion. So it's a message that needs to come across a teaching, and you need to find different ways. Not everyone has the same level of understanding, or they have a different way that they understand things. And it's our job to find these ways so that it's easier for them, because it's a matter of life. So it's very, very important. It's not something that will not make a difference. If you don't understand how you manage insulin, that can be very risky for your child. So for us, it's number one priority to make sure that you understand what we teach you.
Okay.
And you can be open if you don't understand. So you can ask them to repeat or to find different ways to make the teaching.
I'm just gonna ask you some quick fire myth busting questions to put it out there in the world, just so we can all be clear. Children with type 1 diabetes can't eat sweets.
Yes, so that's number one myth. They can eat sweets. But as I wouldn't recommend to any child without diabetes to have lots of sweets every day, I wouldn't even recommend it to a child with diabetes. So they can eat anything that the child without diabetes can eat. You might see some higher blood sugar levels that they're a bit more difficult to manage if you have lots of sweets. But again, there are some solutions. And then it's not the end of the day if you have one day a little higher blood sugar levels. But you definitely can eat sweets if you have type 1 diabetes. And if you have type 2, but in moderation.
We love to hear it. Do you know, I was told when I was diagnosed at 8 years old.
Oh, do I want to hear that?
No, probably not.
What did they tell you?
They told me that, I could never eat sweets again. Yeah.
When did you find out about the truth?
Well, I think my stomach led me to the truth. But yeah, thankfully, I think the thinking has changed. So
Yeah.
we're doing just fine. Me and sweets are well acquainted, mostly through
Good.
hypos though. Chocolate, that's all me. Okay. Children with type 1 diabetes can't do the things that other children do, like play sports or go to sleepovers.
We recommend playing sports unless there is a specific reason for a specific child that they can't play in sports. We recommend sports. It's actually in the NICE guidelines that every child can, unless, as I said, there is a specific reason, they can take part in all forms of exercise. But it's again, it's good to have a discussion because different types of exercise play a different role on the impacts the blood sugar levels differently, and we have to manage them differently as well. But they can do anything they want. And then as far as concerns the sleepovers, it's good that the other parent or family knows how to manage some situations. For example, if you have a hypo, how to help you. But also if the child is quite young, maybe the parent can send a picture to the other parent or discuss with them what they're going to eat. So definitely they can do sleepovers. They go on residential trips. We provide training to the people at school. So you can definitely do things that children with diabetes without diabetes can do.
Amazing. And children with type 1 diabetes can't live a normal life, quote unquote, normal life as an adult.
They can definitely live a normal life. You can do all the things that you did or you would do if you didn't have diabetes. Of course, there is a lot more work. So someone may challenge that and say, how is this normal? Because I have check my blood sugar levels several times a day. I have to take insulin. Yes, that's true. But you're still normal and you can still do anything that a person without diabetes would do.
Okay. And children with type 1 diabetes have to follow a specific diet.
Oh, that's another one. No, you don't have to follow a specific diet. You can eat anything you want. And if you hear any term, diabetes diet is usually a marketing term, just to charge you with whatever they're selling you. So no, you can eat anything you want. You don't have to buy any diabetic products or anything that is so-called diabetic or healthy, or you can eat anything.
This episode of Type 1 is sponsored by Dexcom. Using Dexcom CGM has given me so much confidence to make informed diabetes treatment decisions in the moment. You can choose to wear it on your arm or your abdomen, which is so great to give those sites a break. And all Dexcom CGMs have the share and follow feature, even when connected to an insulin pump. So your family and friends can see your glucose levels and get alerts, giving that extra bit of support when needed. Head to dexcom.com to request your free Dexcom ONE Plus sample. Always read the user manual for important product aspect and limitations. Talk to your doctor for diabetes management terms and conditions and terms of use. And with that in mind then, if we're speaking about a child with type 1 diabetes and the parents trying to make meal times go as smoothly as possible, both in terms of the family structure, routine and rhythm, and then the blood sugars and the type 1 diabetes, what are some pointers or tips that you can offer in terms of helping the two align as much as possible, and where to begin with that?
And it's a bit of planning. So if you use the same recipes or you cook the same similar foods every now and then, you can just keep some notes of, for example, you cook something complex like shepherd's pie. If you use the same recipe, then you know the carbohydrates for the whole tray. You can divide, for example, by pieces, and then you can do the same thing. Or if you make some pancakes, how much flour did you use? Do you use the same recipe? So if you weigh the ingredients and you do a little planning, it gets easier. Also, you have in mind to allow some time from the time that you're going to eat as a family for the child to have the 10 to 15 minutes prior to eating that we usually recommend to have their injection. So if you plan ahead, then it doesn't get very stressful for the family. We forgot the insulin, we have to do the carb counting. So planning is good in many ways. Sometimes it's not an available option, is not what can happen because you don't have much time. But most of the times, I think it's manageable. You can do it.
In terms of bringing siblings into the picture, whether that be around meal times or with the diabetes in general, either because there is an impression that the other children aren't getting as much attention, or it's kind of, just difficult to balance all of the extra demands of diabetes on top of childcare in general. Is there anything you can offer in terms of involving the whole family within the rhythm of and the demands of type 1 diabetes?
We're very open if they want to bring the other children in at the appointments, and it's actually quite helpful, especially if they discuss about all these complexities that the child might feel a bit left behind. And then if the sibling is involved in the care, for example, they can help parents or their sibling carb count. They can weigh the foods. They can keep them. They can play with them for the 15 minutes. They have to wait between injection and eating. Um, and I think they feel important when they do that. They don't feel left out. They feel that I'm part of that as well. So that's I think quite helpful for the families.
Yeah, really nice. And in terms of family meal times and all the demands of life, how do you encourage families given the extra considerations and planning required, how do you encourage families to build a healthy relationship with food?
Healthy relationship with food comes firstly from not feeling that you're doing something wrong, that any food is wrong, and that you do something wrong in general. So discussing with them why it is important to plan, why it is important, for example, if the child has to take these 10 to 15 minutes off, to explain why it's important, then ask them whether that's something that is possible to happen, and then help them plan. It doesn't work for everyone and it doesn't work every time. But if they feel that it's not something that it's a problem, but something that you have to plan. Even when you cook a food, you have to plan. For example, when you make pasta, you have to let the water boil for 15 minutes. But you do this without feeling that this is a problem. Although sometimes you really want to see it boiling because you're hungry, you want to prepare your pasta earlier, but you kind of take it for granted. So if you do the same thing for planning about diabetes, maybe it doesn't feel so hard. Maybe it doesn't feel that it's a big problem. And also for children with diabetes, if what they can do, for example, if they start with the vegetables, or if they eat some nuts or foods that they don't contain carbs for the period that they have to wait, then this makes it a bit easier for them. And they don't see food something that I really want it. I feel so hungry and I can't have it. So you can have other foods in the meantime. Start with the vegetables, or start with some other foods without carbs, and then it makes it a little easier.
Yeah. So I've heard like building in the diabetes steps as part of the recipe, almost as part of the cooking
Yes.
of the mealtime, right? And then secondly, specifically to pre-bolus, like so they don't have to hold off eating completely. There are maybe some things like vegetables or nuts that they can have so that
Yeah.
they start eating, I guess, with everybody else is kind of one of the main concerns, or could be one of the main concerns there. Does that go as well? Like, just going back to your point about children wanting to feel normal, if we stick with pre-bolusing for a minute, what do you see in terms of children at school maybe forgetting to pre-bolus until that food is in front of them, or just being busy chatting to their friends, etc.? Is there anything you can offer around that, or what discussions do you have with the young people in terms of trying to get the pre-bolus to happen?
We can talk with school and see if the child can leave the class a bit earlier to have their meal, see what they're going to eat, and then count the carbohydrates. Maybe have their bolus before we see whether that's possible. Then there are some types of insulin that work quicker than others. This can be discussed with the consultants at the hospital appointment at the MTT clinic. We can see whether that's possible in general. So it's like I said, it's not 100% something that can happen, but in most cases there are some things that they can do at school to have the pre-bolus. So again, it's having this conversation and see individually what can we put in place to help you.
And in terms of speaking to the young person, because as you mentioned before, it's their diabetes, and you know it's for them to kind of start to make these choices as they become more independent. I've seen on your Instagram some interesting approaches to getting young people, boys, girls, interested in remembering to even take their
Bolus,
insulin,
yeah,
or all these little intricacies around it. So do you want to
yeah.
just kind of go through those, because I found them really fascinating?
Thank you. So I see that in clinic sometimes when I feel that whatever I'm discussing doesn't have an impact on them, and you see this blank uh, gaze, and you think, "Oh, I need to find something else. I need to find something else." And then usually with boys, I talk about exercise, and suddenly they're listening. Suddenly they are interesting interested to hear what I have to say. And this is true. So I'm not saying something that is not true. But if you don't take your insulin, for example, then it's not going to help you with your sports. So we have to talk about things that they are interested about. So boys usually are interested about sports. Girls are interested more about nutrition and nice hair or strong nails. So it doesn't matter really what your motivation is, but if you follow some nutritional advice or carb counting advice or take your insulin advice, then that's good for us as long as you take your insulin. So yeah, and I say that it's you have to talk to them. Of course, we talk about the risk of complications as well, but I don't like to focus too much on that. I prefer to talk about the positive things and where insulin helps. Not that if you don't take your insulin, this is what's going to happen to you, but what you're going to gain if you take your insulin. And I talk about how the insulin as a key that opens the doors of the cells, and then you can use glucose as energy. So you can talk about things that they are a bit more positive and
Yeah, I think
interesting.
that's a really interesting point about focusing on what this can give you and can offer you rather than what it's taking away from you. So I saw on that particular example that in this case, taking the insulin is going to help you um, excel better at your sport or perform better in your sport. It's going to help you have more energy to play that sport and be better at that sport. Is that an approach that you've seen be quite effective?
Yeah, in many of them, because for example, I've had some boys that they wanted to put on weight, but they had very high blood sugar levels, and then we were talking about the importance of taking your insulin for that, because you're losing. You can't put on muscles if you're not taking your insulin properly. So if you don't have enough energy because you don't take your insulin for your food, how are you going to perform? And we talk about all the benefits that you've got by taking your insulin properly, but also if you play sports, then we have to talk about the hypoglycemia risk and you need to manage your insulin, because you're not going to take the same amount of insulin if you go for a run, for example. So it's a combination of how the insulin can be beneficial and how to manage it as well when you would play sports.
Okay, interesting. Thank you for that. And in terms of that part that you kind of touched on earlier around the moving through the kind of teenage years and the child or the young person kind of giving that look of this is my diabetes now, and the parents trying to adapt to allow that child more independence as they get older. Can you speak to that a little bit in terms of your experiences, and then maybe like any practical advice you can offer parents just to feel a bit more comfortable about steadily letting go and letting their child kind of try more and experience more independently?
Mm. So it's a very difficult period for them because they are going through a lot of changes in their body, changes in their mindset. They might change several things in their lives, and then comes their transition period as well when they meet the adult team. And this is the time that we're letting them know that this is the time that you get more. You get to do more about your diabetes. It's mostly you rather than your parent. But we are letting them know as well that it's okay for your parent to chip in when they need to, because it's for your benefit. Because we understand that you have other things to do and you don't want to do diabetes things. But it's not okay, on the other hand, to not take your insulin, and this will have an impact later on in life. So this is where we have the discussion also about the complications risk as well. It's important for them to know that both for parents and for children, or young people, that this is something that most of the families go through, or many families go through. So it's not something that other children don't have with their families, and you have the most annoying parent. No, you don't. I'm sorry to bring you the news, but you don't have the most annoying parent here. Um, and also for parents to know that there are many children at this age that they may be resistant to help. Um, Again, like I said before, it's very important to let the young person know that we understand you. That is, you want to do other things, different things to diabetes, but you can't really make it go away if you ignore it. So how can we help you? And also, if you want to be more independent, then you need to be able to do a bit more, so that your parent doesn't have to discuss that so much with you. So it's again having open and honest conversations with the children and young
Yeah.
people.
It's really coming back to that time and time again, isn't it? That trust in communicating the issues and the challenges with a view to finding solutions, but they've got to offer up that in the first place, right? So building an environment where that feels
Yeah,
like it's safe
that
to
it's
do so.
okay, it's safe.
Yeah,
Yes, yeah.
yeah,
And also, it's okay to let them know that I know that you might not be able to follow the advice, but what would be difficult for you to follow? Or if I give you 10 tips, what do you think will be realistic for you to follow? So putting some SMART goals, perhaps, that they're specific, they're measurable. You can follow through, you can review, you can see the outcomes, and then say, okay, what do you think you're going to gain if you do what I suggest that you do? So I really like SMART goals, because you can measure them, you can discuss what's possible, what's not possible, and you are kind of realistic to your expectations and their expectations as well.
okay, great. And have you seen, like, is obviously without naming anyone, I'd just love to kind of offer some um sort of success reassurance to people listening in terms of all these practical tips that you're offering and all this valuable information that you're offering. This reframing, it feels like a reframing in terms of the giving versus what diabetes is taking away, and what is this going to enable you to do? Just if you can give me any example of success that you've had in a specific challenge with someone.
Um, hmm. We've had lots of successes, but I think um, I can now think of a girl who has been struggling taking her insulin for a very long time and has been avoiding to take doses. Blood sugar is really high. And the good thing is that she was coming to clinic, even if she wasn't taking her insulin, the blood sugars were really high, but there wasn't any judgment. We're having the same talks again and again. And then she started taking more and more and more insulin. And that's for us, the success comes from even little steps will have improvement. So we're not expecting to see someone perfect, but if you manage to do this one step that for you feels really a very big one, it's a marathon for you. We may think that that's very, very little, but actually for you, it's a marathon. So if you manage to do that, for me, that's the greatest success. It's not only about having a HbA1c of 70% in range or more, sorry, the time in range 70% of more, or a HbA1c in target, is where you were and where you managed to do. That's the greatest success, and we've had lots of those stories.
Amazing. What's the one thing you wish every parent of a child with type 1 diabetes knew?
Um, I wish they knew that you're doing an amazing job and a really, really, really difficult job. You have to wake up several times every night. You have to do maths. NASA maths several times a day, and you are really doing better than you think. And it's a very difficult job. And well done to all of those mums and dads and carers who do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's the one thing that you wish every child or young person living with type 1 diabetes knew?
That they have a difficult diabetes is a difficult disease to have, and it doesn't go away, type 1 diabetes. But you can absolutely live a normal life despite the fact that you have to do more work, and technology gets better and better and better. So hopefully you will have to do less work and live your life more. But you are absolutely a normal person, as everyone else, and you can live your life as anyone else.
Amazing. Um, in terms of those dreaded post meal spikes, just
Hmm.
keeping it on the practical side of
Hmm.
things here. Um, I mean, they happen. Well, they certainly still happen to me 29 years in. But as you just mentioned, like the tools and the technology and the knowledge and just life experience has kind of helped along the way in various ways. What, in terms of like the basics that I think sometimes we can easily forget or just maybe forget to remember consciously, what are your sort of top 3 tips for avoiding those post meal spikes that get you on that roller coaster that is just awful when you know you're on it and like it's happening? Yeah, top 3 tips.
What I would check first is carb counting, whether you've counted the carbs correctly. The second is if you pre-bolused on time. And the third is carb ratios. So if your carb counting is accurate, then you pre-bolus on time as well. And I would review the carb ratios and what's happening on the second hour and between 2 to 5 hours after the meals. I would start with these three. And then how many times within the week you have high blood sugars? Is it on specific days? And then other days you're more active, for example, and you don't see these spikes? Or is it because of something that you ate before? How many times in the week is happening? But these are the main three. Did you count the carbs correctly? Did you give your insulin on time? And are your carb ratios correct?
Okay, great. And in terms of people who are maybe in the thick of the hormones and figuring life out alongside type 1 diabetes, in your experience, is this something that children and young people do move through and do come out of the other side of? Just to kind of offer that out to people. What's your experience of being in it and then moving through it?
When they're growing, it is a period when hormones definitely play a role and they do get out of that. So you see that there is more insulin resistance at some years. It doesn't happen to everyone, and sometimes people who are more active may not have that so apparent, or they might have it on specific hours of the day. So we can look at those hours individually and see how we can make changes. But it's not always going to be like that. It's for some years during adolescence that you have all these hormones that mess up your blood sugar levels, but it definitely can get um, better afterwards. But it also depends how you manage at those times. So if you see high blood sugars and you just ignore them and you feel that this is difficult, it might be more difficult to get them right later on. So again, discuss with your team, see how you can make changes, see whether there is a problem, for example, early hours of the day or later on, how these hormones affect your blood sugar levels individually, and then get it from there.
Okay. And personally for you, is there anything in your approach as you've moved through this career and over the years? Obviously, the technology has changed so much, a lot of the thinking, me being told I could never eat sweets again, that kind of thing. it feels like it moves so slowly, but then very quickly at the same time. I'm curious as to whether anything in your professional approach has changed or evolved quite significantly from when you started working, particularly in pediatrics.
The technology has helped a lot, definitely. And I'm really happy that, for example, you don't have to prick your fingers 8 times a day and you have the sensors, which is amazing. But what changed, I would say, for me was to have a better understanding of what a person with diabetes has to go through in the day and just being more aware and mindful that I might propose, I might suggest the um, perfect advice, but if it's not realistic for the person who is listening to it, then it's useless. So I think that changed a lot for me to be more understanding, to ask more questions, to be more open to the answers as well, and find ways to connect with people, to have a more open conversation and be able to make more realistic plans for them. I think that's what's changed.
Yeah, nice. And where can people find you? Because as I've mentioned, your Instagram content, I think that's how I found you because, yeah, it's got these practical tips broken down into steps and covering everything from, you know, quote unquote diabetes diet, which we've absolutely negated, even exists, and alcohol and all these different things. So please let people know where they can find you.
They can find me on my Instagram account and message me there to find out how we can work together. It's paediatric.diabetes.dietitian, and then we can discuss how we can work together. And
Okay.
thank you very much for the lovely feedback about my posts. It really makes a difference and makes me want to create more. This is not only
Yeah.
for children and young people, it can apply to anyone really. Some of them can apply to anyone with type 1 diabetes.
Yeah, I mean, it was helpful personally as an adult who's been living with it for a very long time. I think the kind of bite-sized snackable way that these huge big, like, I just think of diabetes equals life. It's just all part of this big jumble of things. And to just zone in on specific things for a minute and be like, oh yeah, actually I can do that. Like, it was actually very reassuring for me. So thank you very much.
That's great
Um,
to hear.
what inspired you to start posting online? I'm just curious.
I had people who were coming to clinics, and then I thought, they waited for a few weeks or months to come and see me. What if they could find this information online? And what about people who aren't patients at the hospital? What about other people out there who go through the same things? And I didn't find the information that I wanted to give them anywhere else online. So I thought, I'll do that. I'll break it down for them. And sometimes I use things that people bring to clinic as questions, and I say, this is what I'm going to post today. This is what I'm going to discuss for other people who may have the same question.
Yeah, it's such a service because I think as well, like there's so much information out there now, which is incredible, but it can be hard to know which parts to take and where the information is coming from. So I think
Yeah.
when that extra layer of reassurance that is coming from a healthcare professional, um, but again, it's so accessible, so relatable, so understandable. Yeah, it was reassuring to me, and I know my mum definitely would have appreciated it way back when we were trying to figure this out for the first few weeks and months. So yeah, I
Yeah,
think
that's
it's
lovely to
great.
hear. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else you want to offer people just before we wrap up? Is there anything we haven't covered that you'd like to touch on?
I think the most important thing is to not ignore diabetes. Be open with your healthcare professionals and just remember that you are doing a lot already, that you're doing great. That's my
Yeah, brilliant.
message for everyone.
Lovely. Beautiful message. And just to quickly clarify, you mentioned there about people messaging in terms of how you might be able to work together. Is that something that you offer outside of your
I do some, yes, one-to-ones as well. I do offer one-to-one appointments.
okay, Perfect. Glad we cleared that up. I will absolutely add that information into the episode description so that people can come and find you. But this has been such a valuable and lovely conversation. Thank you so much for talking
Thank
to
you
me
very
today.
much for inviting me. It was lovely to talk to you.
Absolutely. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Type 1 Please remember that nothing you hear on this podcast should be taken as medical advice. I'm definitely not a healthcare professional. If you like what you hear, hit subscribe and do leave a little review on iTunes if you have time. It really helps to spread the word about type 1 diabetes. And thank you so much for listening.